What's up, guys? Doug Polk here, and welcome back to another episode of me trying to make back $1.2 million in ad revenue. And today we're going to be looking at the big hand, the big one from the game just a couple of days ago. The over $3 million pot that was played on the Hustler Casino Live $1 million cash game. Before we start talking any of the strategy stuff here, there is a massive aspect of this hand that has to get discussed, which is what happens before there is any action at all.
Oh, I saw your hand.
Saw someone's hand?
7.
I saw Wesley's hand.
That 5,000 Slayer then?
Fine. He's gonna fold, right?
I haven't looked at my hand. I know what you have.
It's a weird spot.
30.
I'm just gonna.
Well, if you're gonna play, then
I fold. Just I'm.
Oh, sweat.
He already
I know
did.
what you
saw what he
have.
has.
I know what you have.
You've seen it already.
What?
sorry.
30 to go right now.
Yep.
I owe you one.
I know. You know what?
Accidentally.
Thank you. You know what? You make a good point. You make a good point.
I don't think he understands.
I was looking at my cards and I look over at Wesley, or I was looking at my chips, whatever it was, and I look over and Wesley had peeled up his cards pretty high and I could see his hand. His hand was ace king. So the action folds to him and I say, I know what you have. And really, this discussion that I was having, or rather what I was saying to Wesley, I was trying to get him to acknowledge that I knew his cards. So I say it over and over again, trying to get him to say, oh, okay, I know, like, thank you. But he just kind of ignored it, which made it very strange for me because, and I think I would be balanced. I think I would say that even if it was aces, I'd want him to know I saw his hand. But, the fact he ignored me made it very weird because I wanted confirmation. Hey, man, I can see your hand, so that he knows. Because I don't want a player to think that, or I don't want to look down at my hand and then have to do something. Or maybe if he had aces, like fold kings, because I know he has, or if I had, a good hand, or if I had a pair, or I could, if I know his cards, obviously it's a huge advantage for him. So I tried to really make it so that he knew that I could see his hand, and he didn't really seem to care all that much that I could see his hand, which was confusing. There is an element to this as well, by the way, that people might think, well, if he had aces, I might just muck, right? Nick Garble even makes a joke, like, Wesley, I know what you have, and I just fold without looking at my cards. I think that I would look no matter what, but it's hard to say if I'm balanced or not. I've never had to experience accidentally seeing like this isn't like a sweat, even though Wesley gave me a sweat after I already knew the cards. This isn't like I'm getting a sweat and I'm preparing myself to be balanced in my response. This is I saw his cards and he wouldn't respond to me, and so what conversation happens from there? Just a very weird preflop dynamic. Okay. So, we currently do have stand-up game going, which, by the way, guys, if you think stand-up game doesn't create some action, man, I think you might want to reconsider. It really gets the game going. And the action folds around to LSG Hank in the hijack, who has the ace-8 offsuit. Pumps up to 7K to go. We're playing 501K. I believe there's a 2K straddle here, and there is a 3K ante, so a lot of money already in the pot. When we think about what the blinds really are, because I know it says 501K, we need to think about it in terms of what's the total pot. So let's just say, for example, this is 501K 2K. There's $6,500 in the pot. This is really like playing 2K 4K, which means that, because there's $6,500 in the pot, 2K 4K, that'd be 6,000 in the pot. So it's kind of like playing like a 4.2K big blind in a normal game. So that actually means that the amount of big blinds in this hand is a lot less than you might think. You might think, oh, it's 1,000 or 1,500 big blinds. It's really not the case. It's more like about 380 big blinds deep. And then also there is the stand-up game in effect, so it actually does make the game even a little bit smaller than that. So I don't really know what the exact number of big blinds would be based on how you want to count it, but I do think people just say, oh, 1K big blind. Okay, there's a 2K straddle, there's a stand-up game in effect. There's so much other stuff going on here. We can't just simply chalk this up to being 1,500 big blinds or something, because that's just not the right way of looking at it. Anyway, so LSU Hank opens to 7K. You'll notice Wesley already has a button in front of him, so he does not need to win another hand. Hank, however, does need to win a hand, so he decides to raise a little bit larger than normal. I think, generally speaking, in the stand-up game, raising bigger sizes to try and win the pot pre-flop does make some sense. You need to win the pot more often, and you're going to certainly get played back at more often as well. So I think that's a reasonable choice. Action now on Wesley. I know what he has. We have some fun banter during it, and he decides to 3-bet to $30,000 with ace king. One of the reasons I think I would be balanced here is that he had a good hand, and the way I'm talking about his hand, I feel like indicates, some might look at it and say, oh, he has a bad hand. But he has a strong hand. He has ace king. I don't think of this hand as a weak hand. Now, it's definitely not aces, right? Would I have this exact same response with aces? Hard to say exactly. But he does have a good hand. So I think I would probably be balanced-ish in my response, but it is difficult to know. He decided to 3-bet to $30,000. I think here's a good tip for people at home. If there's been something weird with your cards being exposed, I would say play it safe and either just fold or just call pre-flop. Now, I get that Wesley doesn't think that anyone else saw, which is fine, and I told him I saw, which is fine, and maybe he thinks I'm balanced in my response, which is fine, and in all those cases, it's fine to 3-bet. But in this lineup specifically, it's not a big TV game, and he knows me well. He knows I'm probably going to be at least reasonably balanced in my response. Maybe he's fine or comfortable with it. But for you in your home games, if you think there's some chance someone knows your cards, you basically just can't play the hand. It's just not a reasonable thing to do. Now, sharing hole cards, for the stream, it's kind of fun, but in general, I would lean against doing it, and certainly it's created a couple of awkward scenarios in this game specifically. All right, let's get back into the hand. So he makes it $30,000 to go. Action folds down to Tom Dwan, who has pocket queens. I'm just going to go ahead and show you that. In the actual hand, the card reader did not go off, so no one knew what he had until the end. But he had pocket queens, and so I'll just put the cards in there now. He makes it $100,000 to go. I don't mind this size; seems pretty good. As LSG Hank shows us some cards when the camera unfolds. By the way, guys, you can't really do that because cameras have to focus at the right depth, the high-end cameras. So if you just show your cards, it's not going to pop up. But anyway, regardless. Tom makes it $100,000 to go here. Pocket queens, definitely reasonable. You're going to want to go on the big side. It maybe even should be $120K. I also think his hand will call some. So sometimes he calls. Sometimes he makes $120,000. 100K maybe a little bit small. Out of position, you want to go much bigger. Typically in these situations to cut down on imposition's call odds, but 100K totally fine as well. Back over to Wesley. Here I would definitely lean towards a call with ace king offsuit. I think trying to make this pot any bigger than it already is with ace king is going to be a little bit of a recipe for disaster. But furthermore, I would also want to make sure that I would want to minimize the chance I get stacked because of the pre-flop card sharing or card exposing nonsense. Back over to Tom Dwan. So Wesley does make it $275K. In terms of bet size, seems fine. I think 5 bets usually are big and polar, but he is in position. This does make a very awkward spot for Tom Dwan. He really can only jam here if he has a hand like aces. Even kings for this many lines you probably don't want to put in. So you could also argue Tom should have no jam or nobody raises because it should be aces or basically like something like ace high suited or something like that. So I think if I'm in Tom's shoes in this spot, given everything, I would just only call pre-flop. Out of aces, kings, queens, ace king suited. If I 4-bet ace queen suited, jacks, tens. I'm gonna have a very narrow, strong range of hands. And what kind of sucks here is the out of position player, and Wesley's playing on this a little bit, is when you end up really deep in these spots, the player that calls the 5-bet can only really have a few hands. It's kind of obvious that you have a medium to high pair, or maybe a hand like ace king, ace queen suited, maybe ace jack suited. So anyway, ultimately Tom Dwan does make the call. We have $560,000 in the pot before we even take a flop. So let's go ahead and take a flop. The flop becomes 883, but before we talk about that, if you want to learn how to lose $1.2 million in a high-stakes cash game, head on down to upswingpoker.com and check out all of our latest courses. That's right, you too can learn how to lose a 7-figure amount in just one short session, and the answer is simple: you get aces and you try a big bluff. In all seriousness though, Upswing Poker has a great course offering for everyone. For beginning players, for just $7, you can get in our most basic course, all the way up to our advanced courses with some of the best players in the world like Nick Petrangelo and Darren Elias. You can learn from some of the best players over at upswingpoker.com. Even though Tom Dwan did not say that we were the best place for the money, he did say we were the best place for the click EV. I don't know exactly what that would be for you, because I'm the one doing the clickbaiting. But there you have it. At least he did talk about us on Twitter. Alright, let's go ahead and get back to the flop. The flop becomes 883 with 2 diamonds, and Wesley has the ace of diamonds. Tom Dwan has black queens. Dwan checks over to Wesley now, as he should with all of his hands. On this board, after 5 betting, you're going to want to bet every single hand you can have, and you're going to want to use a small size. Something like 20% pot seems totally fine, which is roughly what Wesley goes for, betting $125,000 on the flop. I would say that there's really nothing to talk about here. When you 5-bet, you mainly have aces or a few specific bluffs, aces, kings, few specific bluffs. Maybe some ace king, maybe some ace 5. So everything just bets the flop. There's nothing to talk about. For Tom, I think you just want to be check calling any hand you continue with. Solvers will sometimes mix in some raises in these spots to deny equity, but given how polar your opponent is, I don't think that there is much reason to do anything here other than just check call your whole range, which could include pocket queens. So let's just go ahead and take the turn. After Tom does ultimately check call, 8-8-3 diamond flop, the offsuit 5 rolls off. Pot now $812,000. And the players have about 1.1 million behind, a little over 1.1 million behind. Tom checks again. I think Wesley's hand is a pretty mandatory turn bet. I think when you have the ace of diamonds, you now block a lot of hands that can call twice. You're not going to have, your opponent can't have ace king of diamonds, can't have ace queen of diamonds. And so you're just simply going to get more folds when you do decide to bet the turn. Now, I know you're kind of ahead of some of those hands with ace king, but the point remains that your fold equity just goes up. And it also gives you some playability on some diamond runouts. If the river is a diamond, you're going to have a nice bluff hand to still fire once again, which is pretty cool as well. So I think that when you have ace king, the diamond and the heart, or really the diamond and not the spade, you don't want to have ace king with a spade here, ace queen with a spade here. You want those hands to be you want spades to call the flop and fold turn. If you have a spade, it's less likely. So basically, what I'm saying is, for in Wesley's shoes, your turn bluffs like diamonds and your turn bluffs don't like spades. Hits both criteria there. And then, of course, the most important thing here, and this is going to be something that we should be focused on more as we get to the river, he does block both aces and kings. And for Tom to call down in this spot, he should mainly call down aces and kings. Because of that, ace king is a very nice bluff hand. You do block the top end hands. Neither player really has an 8. Wesley can have an 8 every now and then. Tom really can never have an 8. So just straight blocking the aces and kings is a very strong, good thing to have here. As you get deeper, you want to make sure your bluffs have good blockers against value and a little less just using the bottom of your range. So for all those reasons, I like Wesley's turn bet. I also like the fact that if he improves, especially in the ace, he's going to be able to value bet pretty effectively. I think this is just a good bet. As for size, I think 350K looks fine. Leaves about 800K behind, 850 behind, or no, 750 behind. You can maybe go a little bit smaller, I think, turn. Maybe like 300K turn. Either way, it's fine. I mean, this is just basically you're setting up a pretty easy river jam. The ranges are very polar, and I like this hand in Wesley's shoes. Back over to Tom. Pocket queens, you got to be getting really, 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 really unhappy. Really unhappy. I actually think with queens here, I would start folding the turn a chunk of the time. I mean, this is just so ugly. This is just so ugly for queens. You're in a situation now where your opponent can have aces or kings, or occasionally have an 8, and can have equity against you when they're bluffing. We have ace king, still has a good chunk of equity against you. You know, he could have diamonds, a lot of stuff. Yeah, if he somehow had the 7-6 suited, that's got equity now too. A lot of really dangerous stuff going on here, and I would certainly be folding queens at least some of the time. I might be mixing between both actions here on the turn. The good news in Tom's shoes is I think Tom's just going to have aces and kings here basically always. I don't think he's going to be jamming those pre-flop all that often, especially aces. So in my personal opinion, I would probably start to occasionally fold queens in the turn, which I know seems really nitty. And maybe if you have a good live read on what it meant when, the whole pre-flop back and forth thing, which kind of got to go back into that, maybe that influences him and he thinks this can't be a good hand or it's less likely to be a good hand. So maybe he's just going with some live reads, which, maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. Hard to say for sure here, but he ultimately does make the call, and let's take a river. The river comes an offsuit 6, so 9-7 suited has gotten there, but that's kind of unlikely, but I guess possible. A couple other really not very possible hands, like 7-4 suited, 4-2 suited get there. That said, Wesley did 4-bet the 8-4 suited already this session, or 5-bet the 8-4 suited already this session, so maybe it is possible, but it's unlikely. couple random hands get there, but nothing too crazy. This is, by all intents and purposes, a brick. Tom checks once again, and now in Wesley's shoes, I don't think I like having the ace of diamonds anymore. I think that's a good reason to bet turn. I think on the river, this hand is not as good because there aren't as many hands that call fold. Now, you know, you have ace king. If you had ace king diamonds, you'd be chopping, but he just can't have that. I don't know the net result of that. My mind is just failing to really fully comprehend how that changes the blocking effect. There's a good general rule to take away at home, and I assume you guys want some rules to take away. When you have the nut flush draw blocker, you typically like to bet flop, bet turn, but not bet river because you want them to have the nut flush draw. So typically speaking, a hand like 10-9 of clubs, if you did bet twice here, would be a great hand to bluff with. Now, you don't really have that pre-flop. So I do think that you've got to take some ace kings and just take it to the house. Typically speaking, the ones that are the best ones to use are the ones that don't bet turn that much. So remember when I told you ace king of spades would be not a good turn bet? If you did bet turn, it would bet the river. And you might say, well, I didn't bet the turn because it's a bad turn bet. Well, sometimes you bet turns with those kinds of hands, or maybe ace king of clubs or whatever, so that you can have river jams. Ace king of clubs is a very nice river jam because now you have ace, you don't block any of the flush draws, and you also still block aces and kings. I do think ace king is the best bluff hand here for Wesley. I do think so. I would be interesting what the solver would say, although it's tough to solve when you have stand-up game and variable antes and straddles and 400 blinds deep, and you know, can you throw in your solver that someone saw someone's cards? Probably not, which is what kind of makes live poker so beautiful in a way. Live poker is way more like art, and online poker is way more of a science, because how can you put into a program to have it say, stand-up game's on, these guys are in, that guy's not, this guy straddled 400 big blinds, you know, and someone saw someone's cards? You can't, right? So you could either approach it, the cards part is just balanced, but then the stand-up thing is weird, and then the stack depth, the decision tree is so massive. It just kind of comes down to what do you think? And I do think ace king is the best bluff hand. You make it so that Tom is way more likely to have pocket queens. That is a sensible bluff. I still do not like the ace of diamonds here. I would not have done this. Maybe also because it is bluffing for 1.6 million. I hope I have that gear. But with this hand, I just don't think I would use it. I think I would, if I had like ace king of clubs, I might find the triple. But this one I would just check back. Unfortunately for our man Wesley, he does decide that it is time to go all in, and he wagers $800,000 on the river. And before we get to Tom Dwan's decision, can I just take a moment to say how incredibly awkward it is to be me here? I have significantly impacted the hand, not by doing something wrong, by the way, but just by me telling him I saw his cards. I have impacted this hand, right? Trying to do the right thing, but still have impacted the hand. And now I have to just sweat out what is already a gigantic pot, will be the largest pot in hustler history or in poker streaming history or whatever it is, and I have to just sit there and just sweat it out. Wesley can't even do. Wesley goes into the shell. I'm just trying to lock in. They're like, did he say all in? No one's saying anything, and I just like, he said all in. Like I'm just like, I just don't want to be a part of this hand, and I don't want to impact it. Right? I'm happy to have a front row seat, and this maybe is why you should sweat cards at stakes this big. Happy to have a front row seat, but I don't want to be impactful. Anyway, I've said that enough times. Okay, so very awkward situation for me in this hand. Back over to Tom. Wow, what a spot. And I like that he's like, all right, let me go get a water. I'm gonna have to think about this one. I would just fold, man. I would just fold. And maybe this is what separates, you know, me from Tom Dwan is I just don't really approach poker in this kind of way where I get such a strong read on a situation. Tom's obviously played a gigantic more live poker than I have, and he just is very confident in the reads that he makes. But the way I look at this in Tom's shoes, I'm going to have aces and kings here. I'm just going to. Those are solidly in my range. I don't even know how often I have queens. I would definitely call aces here. Kings, I would probably just suck it up and say, you got it, put it in. But I just don't think I could call with queens or jacks. By the way, interesting note, aces and kings, it's actually better to call with those hands when you have the diamond, because those hands shouldn't be bluffing. So aces, ace of diamonds is actually a really, well, aces is the nuts effectively, so you're going to call that regardless. But kings, king of diamonds tends to be a little bit better of a call than without the diamond here because those diamond hands don't bluff river. It's kind of a cool little thing to think about. But anyway, so I would fold, but Tom Dwan, the legendary man himself, does walk us through exactly what he has to do.
Doug saw his hand, tried to talk him out of 3-betting. He 3-bet anyway. I mean, I guess he just flopped an 8, but it seems very hard to fold. Oh, feels like you just flopped fucking chips, huh?
He's got queens. There's the call.
Hey, call.
Call.
Tom Dwan has just won the biggest pot in the history of televised poker. $3.1 million to Tom Dwan.
This is 1.5 and change. Holy shit.
Get after Wesley.
Wesley,
40.
you're a champion.
70.
70.
You have more heart than anyone here.
1, 2, 3.
You okay, Wes?
784, 5.
7.
Absolutely incredible call from Tom here on the river, and he does win this $3.1 million pot and responds with a little after, he needs a beer. It's a good time for a beer. $3 million pot, 1 beer. Fair price to pay. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. I will see you again soon. Peace.